Hey guys, Bored Now here with you for another horror movie review, and on this video I will be reviewing See No Evil, the WWE produced horror movie, slasher movie from 2006. It of course stars one of their top wrestlers at the time, that is the Big Red Machine Kane, or Glenn Jacobs as his real name was, and he plays the monster of the piece, which is Jacob Goodnight. And the fact that he's named Jacob is no coincidence, and I'll get to why that is. You've probably already guessed, and there's some religious connotations going on. But yeah, that's the movie I'm going to talk about. And the promotion for this movie is something I remember a lot about at the time, because I'm a big wrestling fan, in case you don't know. And certainly at the time I watched WWE every week. So around the time this film was about to come out, that they just promoted it to death on WWE television. And they did this whole storyline with it approaching to the film's release with Kane, where he just hated it. Basically, he hated mention of the date May 19th. It became a thing where other wrestlers would really try and psych him out by saying the date, and Kane would just snap for some reason, which I don't think they ever really explained, but there you have it. But that was the release date of the film. But yeah, this was WWE Studios, obviously one of their spin-off ventures. I think it was the first film released through WWE I don't remember one before this. And financially, it was a moderate success. It kind of made its budget back. It made 18 million, which was more than it cost. But I think when you factor in sort of advertising costs and all that sort of thing, I think it was touch and go whether it made its money back. Ultimately, I think it had a better life on DVD, and maybe being shown on TV. I think it's certainly struggled to find an audience in the cinemas. So maybe a moderate success overall. But I'm going to talk about the film and the quality of it. And because ultimately the WWE Studios experiment hasn't worked. Most of the films they've produced have been flops. They've been critically panned. And yeah, many of them are largely forgotten. You would struggle to name more than 3 or 4 movies that have been produced through WWE Studios. I think it's got to the point now where they've abandoned the project. I know they still have, apparently guys from the roster, guys and girls, appearing in movies, but it tends to be like cameos, I think, in other people's movies. So one of those where it was a failed experiment, a failed spin-off, which tends to be the case with Vince McMahon and his side projects. I mean, he's obviously been hugely successful in the wrestling business, revolutionized it, but it's one of those ironies. He's made so much money at the wrestling business, been so successful, and yet 9 times out of 10, when he tries anything else, any other side projects or ventures, it normally just dies a death. But here we have See No Evil, the first attempt to promote promote and produce their own movie. The film is directed by Gregory Dark, and if you've heard that name before, that's because he's quite famous for directing adult pictures, as they call them. And apparently, I'll take their word on this, but he is one of those guys who has actually carved out a career for himself in regular feature films. So has actually like stepped outside and crossed over from the adult porn world into actual regular movies, so to speak. But watching this film, I think you definitely get a sense of his sensibility when it comes to movie making. The setup is very basic. It's very kind of by the numbers and what you might expect from like a low budget sort of slasher movie. So you kind of get your first glimpse of Jacob Goodnight, Kane, Glenn Jacobs, whatever you want to call him, at the beginning, where you see this woman is trapped in this house. You get a couple of police officers come in and she's screaming, she's got a blindfold on, and then they take that off and it's revealed she's got no eyes. And as they're trying to save her, trying to untie her, Jacob comes out of nowhere. He kills one of them and he cuts off the hand of the other one. And that's kind of our opening scene. And then it moves forward to the present day, where these group of like convicts, young offenders, are part of this program to give back to the community. And I think the idea is that it could stand them in good stead when it comes to getting parole or maybe early release or something like that. So they all reluctantly are taken on this trip to this homeless place, supposedly where homeless people, like some sort of just place for them to stay and be safe. So they're basically there doing community service to like just clean the place, wash it, whatever the case may be. It's meant to be part of their rehabilitation. And pretty much all of them are like miserable about the prospect and don't want to do it. But that's kind of the setup and the place, the setting for most of the film, and that's where, as it happens, Jacob Goodnight is located, and it slowly unfolds in a typical kind of slasher type movie setup, with him starting to go through the victims, but we slowly get a sense of his past and what drove him mad and what led him to such brutal actions. So we get flashbacks as well. And it's absolutely rubbish. It's terrible. It's actually, last night when I watched it was the first time I'd seen it. I'd never got round to seeing it. And I think it was just one, as a big horror fan, I think I just wanted to like tick that box. Sort of curious, because I thought at the very least, I remember the reviews not being great, but I kind of figured at the very least then I could see Kane making a good sort of like crazy monster type villain. And you never know. I mean, there could be some good like B-movie fun in there. But yeah, it's really, really rough. I'd actually seen the sequel, See No Evil 2, directed by the Saskia sisters, which came out a few years later. I actually saw that before this one. So I thought I'd go back and check this out, but yeah, it's really really bad. And I mean, actually, one thing I have to say about Kane is not than you would expect a wrestler to necessarily be a good actor or anything, but this just seemed like a dream come true type role for him that would just suit him down to the ground, because it is so close to his wrestling persona, and that's obviously why they cast him. And I'm not sure if it's just a case of bad direction, or for whatever reason he just wasn't up to the task, but it just seemed a no-brainer that he would be an effective sort of monster. Now, I think it's possible that they don't really use him to the best of his abilities, but yeah, he's just not very good in it. His reactions are very sort of like static and quite wooden, and there's a scene where he's like meant to be like really like evil and malevolent, and just having this, he's almost meant to be laughing like maniacally, and like there's a scene where he sort of, one of the girls are trying to escape out the window of this house, and it's this whole thing where the other guy who's with her, he's been like helping her like hold on to the rope, and then the next thing you know, Jacob appears and he's got the rope, and it becomes this thing where she's like dangling, and he's meant to be laughing and enjoying it and being all evil, and there's just nothing there. He just doesn't really come across as very convincing, and in the scenes when he's meant to be like really out of control and menacing, he just lacks the menace, he lacks the presence. He just looks like sort of a regular big guy. Well, I say regular big guy, obviously there's not many people who are close to 7 feet tall and as big as he is, but he just looks like someone who just happens to be that size, and obviously they've made him look quite sort of disfigured, but apart from that, he doesn't really strike you as a particularly scary character. So I do wonder if it's bad direction, if maybe there was just a lack of interest in things for him to do in the script. I think also it doesn't help the way they cut around him, because obviously they do this thing where they try to keep his reveal till quite far into the film. But the problem with that is we do at least get a glimpse of him early on, and we sort of see enough. And the problem is, people who go into this film at the time, and even more so now, they're gonna know than it's the wrestler Kane. They're gonna know who the monster of the movie is. But I can understand, that sort of logic of slowly revealing the monster, rather than him being like you see him straight away, or you see he's constantly in the shot. But I think because you have these other characters, and in some ways they're more the main characters, just because you spend more time with them, and it just means you're cutting around Jacob a lot, and I think that ultimately makes his backstory and the whole reveal of why he is the way he is, I think that makes that feel a bit flat, because it probably hasn't given it enough time to build. But it's very odd the way they cut round who is essentially meant to be the star of the movie, and yeah, as a result, he just feels like a very underwritten, very sort of weak monster. And they just sort of shoehorn in this convenient sort of backstory, and you get these very cheap looking like flashbacks and these kind of like irritating sound effects where you get the sound of like an old woman's voice in his head and in the flashback, so it slowly shows you these bits from his past. And again, it just feels very forced, and it kind of takes you out of the flow of what's going on. And it's a very strange plot, the way it jumps around these different characters and has no real flow, no real consistency. So I mean, talking about the other cast members, the acting is very, very bad in this, very, very wooden. It's like B movie acting at its worst. Now, probably the most notable actor from the rest of the cast is Rachael Taylor, who people know as Trish in Jessica Jones. And it's funny because this is like actually, I think this movie was actually set in Australia. It certainly has like an Australian like funding behind it. So a lot of the actors I think they are like local Australian actors, and Rachael Taylor does come from Australia originally. And she's kind of gone on to do all right for herself. Certainly, Jessica Jones was a pretty big show, and I think she's good on that generally. And this just looks like one of those early roles for her. It's just quite funny, the fact that she was in this movie before anyone knows who she was. And she's not bad in the film. She's just not really given anything to do. It's just such a bland sort of character. And she kind of looks bored, which sort of goes with the character. She's meant to be like the superficial one. But yeah, she's just putting no effort into it at all. I think you can tell that she's really bored. And doesn't want to be in the movie. And generally, these actors in the supporting cast are really, really bad. I think there's a couple of actors who are sort of alright. The character of like the prison guard, who was the cop in the past, who's part of the group like escorting them to this house. He's not a bad actor, but again, that's something that is sort of a bit wasted because he's there just because he was in the scene at the beginning. But they don't really make much of that fact. They don't really give him a lot of motivation. They don't really run with that, the fact that he has a past with Jacob. So he just felt like a wasted character who happened to have this like link to his past, and they just dial like the annoying factor up to 11 with like the kind of inmates who are there, and even the ones that are meant to be sympathetic, there's just not a lot of like effort put into their characters, and it's kind of unconvincing. But like I think they are going for like the really annoying slasher type, fodder type characters who then are kind of set up to be like just killed. Mostly, obviously, that I'll get into sort of survivors and stuff, but it's just really bland and predictable, really cardboard cutout characters. Yeah, there's just nothing to any of them, and they're just like walking stereotypes. They're just, I think if you're gonna have like a bunch of annoying characters who then become like potential fodder for the killer, then you've got to like just liven it up with them. You've got to have them hamming it up. You've got to give them entertainingly bad dialogue, which obviously some classic slasher movies like Friday the 13th does have, and this is the worst of both worlds. It's not only a really naff slasher movie, but it's not even like an entertaining bad slasher movie. It's very bland, it's very one note, and you can see from the opening of the film that it's really, really cheap. The look of it, the colours, the kind of, even the opening credits, even though when the title screen comes up, even though it's not a particularly old film, it already looks very dated, even though it was only like 2006, with really, really naff effects. And in the opening scene, like the acting with the cops just looks like TV movie type acting, and the whole like colour scheme in the film. I tell you what, it reminded me of. It just looks like the director Gregory Dark just like whizzing off to like the grimy look of something like Seven, and just getting off on like the music videos of Marilyn Manson, something like that. So like The Beautiful People, and just trying to combine the two in this terrible sort of mishmash. It just looks so lame and amateurish. There's no style to the film at all. The fact that it has this setting, like this whole house, this whole apartment, and the look of it, they just go for like, they just go for the very typical on the nose, like moth ridden flea pit. It just seems so forced. And I didn't believe in like the characters, like the inmates. I didn't believe in any of their drama. I didn't really believe they were prisoners, even the ones that are meant to be threatening. Like you have the character of Mike, who's meant to be like this total jerk and meant to be trying to be the badass of the group, and he just looks like a soap actor. Basically, he just looks squeaky clean. Sorry, and yeah, I don't buy him as a bad boy at all. And you get this forced drama. So you get this one particular girl, Christina. Is it Chris? I think it's Kira, actually. Christina was the other girl. They're the two characters who are meant to be kind of likeable, and they are. You know, you're convinced that they're sort of decent enough people, even though they're still boring characters. But anyway, Kira has a history on the streets, and she had a thing with I think it's the Mike character, where they were together and he sort of got her to turn tricks and supposedly raped her. And of course there's no sensitivity in the way the film handles that plot. But just forced drama like that, just convenient just to create a bit of drama. But the pacing of the film is all off. It just skips around these things, blah blah blah. No consistency to it. No real time spent with that. And yeah, the whole thing looks like a very grimy but very cheap, like MTV pop video. And it's not scary. There's no tension. And worst of all, the kills are pretty crap. There's not really a standout kill. I think it's one of those films that just tries to force it into being something cool. It's kind of just like guys jacking off, just saying, "Hey, wouldn't it be cool if we did that? Look at this!" And because it's like the opening scene with Kane's character with Jacob. Well, it's with the girls with the cutout eye, the first girl, and the camera then dives through the eye. There's a shot where it goes inside the eyeball, and it just feels like, yeah, showing off and trying to be ultra stylish and hip for the sake of it, but it's just not. That's the problem. It's just not working. It just feels like, hey, wouldn't it be cool if we do this shot? This is just so out there, man. Yeah, it's it's totally lame, and the kills are weak. They don't leave any sort of an impression. At one point, he like the first kill or the first major kill, he just drags a guy into the elevator. He's got him by the hook. He just drags him in, and like the door kind of closes on his leg, squashes it, but there's just nothing to it. It just looks really fake and phony looking. There's nothing to make you squirm. There's nothing scary. I think one of the missed opportunities of the film is the fact that you don't have Kane or Jacob Goodnight stalking around the hotel. You don't have him doing the whole Michael Myers thing where he just looks like a badass and he's like a machine. He stalks them, which is kind of would be similar to Kane's wrestling persona. So that would really work to his strengths, to have that type of badass machine-like presence. But they don't do that. They cut around. They go to like a couple of characters here, then they jump back maybe for a kill, then they jump back to something else. It's just so scattershot. You just get, as I said, no consistency. Really weak kills. They just lame attempts to try and crank up the tension. Really, really poor, ropey sort of sound effects. As I said, that kind of those voices in his head in like the flashbacks. And I guess I should get to the twist because there's not too much else to say. But the twist, and it's his mother who abused him as a boy, and the whole religious angle because she was very religious. So it's like she trained her baby boy to kill sinners or people they see as sinners, and that's like the whole twist, because obviously with these being like inmates, they're seen as sinners, so they're like the perfect target for Jacob Goodnight. So Jacob, the name, has religious connotations, and one of the twists is that the woman who actually runs this program, who's obviously arranged for the prison to send the prisoners here, she's his mother. That's the twist. So that's revealed. So whatever, that kind of gives that motivation. But yeah, it's even though that twist sort of works, it's just all over the place, and you get this whole back and forth between them when she is like just berating him and just screaming at him to like kill them, and eventually he just turns on her and kills her, and it's this whole thing. It's this whole, again, just forcing drama rather than it being there naturally. And you get what is meant to be a little arc for the Michael character, because throughout the film he's just been this like sexist sort of jerk. But like at the end he kind of like mans up and is sort of like a hero, because he having been like beaten down earlier in the film. He pops up out of nowhere in one of the bedrooms. He attacks Jacob and goes after him and helps the two remaining girls. So I'm pretty sure it's Christina and Kira. And there's a significance from earlier in the film because the fact that Jacob keeps one girl alive and cuts out her eyes as like a religious sort of symbol. So that sort of gives them the sense that then he's going to keep Kira alive. But in the end, it comes down to the two girls, and then Michael fighting him off. And it's this whole thing where they're knocking him out the window, they're like triple teaming him, and that scene's quite good fun, but there's not a lot to it. I mean, eventually he does fall down and falls through like a greenhouse or something, and that again, it's just like an over the top effect which doesn't look very convincing. Like the camera work and the shots are just very, very sort of clunky. And I think even though it's like this arc for Michael, it's totally unearned because there's been no build up to it over the course of the film. I guess it's just like him manning up, and he's got this line which is kind of dumb. He just says, one of them says, "You didn't have to save us," and he says, "Well, I didn't want to get out of here on my own." And that was kind of his heroic sort of line, because he obviously had the choice to leave without them rather than risking his life. So that change isn't really convincing, but there you have it. And actually, I should just say, because I was shitting all over the kills, and I think the movie hit rock bottom where you had like the Rachael Taylor kill, because she, first of all, her cell phone gives her away because she's like hiding from Jacob, and it rings, and that's how he finds her, which fine, but it's still a bit dumb. But what makes it worse is he kills her with the cell phone. That's how he kills her. So he literally like sticks it down her throat, and that's how he kills her. So it's like, yeah, fuck you, film, fuck you. Yeah, with a cell phone. She chokes on a cell phone. That's how she dies. Seriously, what an insult. What BS. So there you have it. That's pretty much it. There's this funny little shot at the end, like when they've cut away to the credits and they come back, I think halfway through. And because there's this funny thing with is it a cat or is it? I think it's a dog, because there's this scene earlier with the dogs when one of the victims like falls down like the shaft or something, and he ends up sort of getting his foot like tangled and like rips his flesh, so then the dogs come along and mangle him. But at the end, yeah, the dogs are licking around Jacob's body, and there's just one of these like scenes where he then just sits up sort of thing, or he like lifts his arms. So that's kind of like the cliffhanger, which is setting up the sequel, which they were hoping for, which they got obviously a few years later. And I'll cover the sequel soon. I'll review that. That's by the Saskia sisters. And so that's it. Pretty shit. Pretty awful. And I will give See No Evil a 3 out of 10. It is really, really bad. Not the worst I've seen. Not totally dire. But very little to recommend it, if anything. It's really, really poor. There you have it. And no fun, really. not really, outside one or two moments. So that's my review of See No Evil, and I will be back soon with a review of the sequel. So thanks for listening. More horror movie reviews coming soon, and I'll see you guys later. Goodbye.